There is a moment, quiet, subtle, almost unnoticeable, when something inside you shifts. A whisper rises, a tremor begins, a thought, small at first, grows into a storm. It is the moment when fear begins to speak louder than faith. You don't always realize it immediately. Fear is stealthy. It crawls under the skin quietly. It disguises itself as wisdom, caution, logic, survival instinct. It sounds rational. It sounds realistic. Sometimes fear even sounds holy. But deep inside, you know the truth. Fear has a voice. And if you're not careful, it becomes the loudest one in your life. Fear tells stories, faith tells truth. And the story you choose determines the life you live. This is the battle that has defined humanity from the beginning. The voice of fear versus the voice of faith. One pulls you backward, the other pulls you forward. One builds walls, the other builds wings. One suffocates, the other rescurects. And in every soul, both voices speak. The real question is, which one do you obey? Fear has a language, and it knows your name. Fear doesn't shout. It whispers precisely what will break you. It knows the exact insecurities to tap, the exact memories to reactivate, the exact doubts to amplify. Fear studies you. Fear learns you. Fear memorizes every wound, every disappointment, every failure you've ever survived, and then it weaponizes them. Fear says, you've never been enough. You'll fail again. You're not ready. You will lose everything. What if this ends badly? What if you get hurt? What if you're wrong? What if you're not strong enough? Fear speaks in what ifs. Faith speaks in even if. Fear says, what if it falls apart? Faith says, even if it does, I won't. Fear says, what if you're alone? Faith says, even if I am, I'll rise anyway. Fear says, what if this kills you? Faith says, even if it hurts me, it will not own me. Fear imagines the worst. Faith expects the possible. Fear paralyzes. Faith propels. But fear is convincing, dangerously convincing, because fear always sounds like it wants to protect you. Fear rarely presents itself as the enemy. Fear pretends to be safety, but nothing is more dangerous than a fear disguised as wisdom. Fear speaks loudly because it wants to speak first. Fear knows that if faith gets even a moment to breathe, fear loses its grip. Faith doesn't need a crowd. Faith doesn't need applause. Faith doesn't need clarity. Faith doesn't need certainty. Faith doesn't need perfect conditions. Faith only needs oxygen. So fear tries to suffocate it before it awakens. Fear speaks first, so faith won't speak at all. You can see this dynamic everywhere, right before a leap, right before a confession, right before a decision, right before a calling, right before a risk, right before a breakthrough. The moment something great is about to happen, fear becomes loud, louder than ever. Not because you're weak, but because fear knows what you're capable of. When faith finally opens its mouth, fear becomes loudest when your destiny comes closest. Faith isn't silent. You just stopped listening. Faith is not weak. Faith is not timid. Faith is not passive. Faith is a warrior. But unlike fear, faith doesn't scream. Faith doesn't panic. Faith doesn't manipulate. Faith doesn't intimidate. Faith speaks in calm conviction. Faith speaks in steady assurance. Faith speaks in a language that fear cannot understand. But you must be still to hear it. Faith says, you were made for this. You are not alone. You will rise again. This darkness is not the end. You are stronger than you think. Keep going, keep believing, keep breathing. Faith's voice is quiet, not because it is weak, but because it is confident. Faith doesn't shout because it doesn't need to compete. Truth never yells. Lies do. Faith waits for you to tune your ear away from fear's noise. But the world you live in amplifies fear constantly. News, social media, comparison, past trauma, economic pressure, societal expectations, memories that haunt everything external tries to amplify fear. Everything internal tries to amplify faith. The loudest voice wins, not the truest one. Fear builds prisons. Faith builds paths. Fear is a master builder. But what fear builds is not life. It is limitation. Fear builds anxiety. Excuses hesitation, regret, isolation, procrastination, perfectionism, paralysis. Fear builds invisible walls that feel safer than the unknown, yet more suffocating than the truth. You think fear is protecting you, but fear is imprisoning you. Faith builds something different, something fearless and wild. Faith builds courage, resilience, character, vision, purpose, identity, freedom. Fear builds cages. Faith builds bridges. Fear keeps you from entering the unknown. Faith walks ahead of you into it. Fear freezes you where you are. Faith moves you where you're meant to be. And here is the ultimate truth. Your future is decided by the structures you allow to be built inside you. The most dangerous form of fear is the one you think is normal. Fear doesn't always feel like fear. Sometimes it feels like busyness, overthinking, apathy, needing validation, needing control, chronic distraction, self-sabotage, indecision, perfectionism. These are not personality traits. They are symptoms of fear. Fear hides behind logic. Fear hides behind planning. Fear hides behind "I'm not ready yet." Fear hides behind your highest intelligence. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, quietly in the places you consider normal. But if you follow its trail, you will notice that everything fear touches becomes smaller. Everything faith touches becomes bigger. Your life shrinks or expands, depending on which voice you trust. Fear has evidence. Faith has vision. Fear builds its case from your past, your failures, your heartbreaks, your mistakes, your disappointments, your shame, your trauma. Fear gathers evidence like an attorney preparing to win a trial against your destiny. But faith does not rely on your past. Faith relies on your future. Faith says, "I see who you're becoming. I see the strength not yet tested. I see the courage not yet awakened. I see the wisdom being formed. I see the possibilities beyond your fears." Fear uses memory. Faith uses imagination. Fear sees what happened. Faith sees what is possible. Fear sees the valley. Faith sees the mountaintop. Beyond the valley, fear sees the wound. Faith sees the healing hidden inside the wound. Fear sees the obstacle. Faith sees the path through it. Evidence belongs to fear. Vision belongs to faith. What you believe determines what you see. Fear speaks loudest when you stand on the edge of change. Every major transition comes with internal noise. The noise is not a sign you're in the wrong place. It's a sign you're on the verge of breakthrough. Before every major transformation, fear always increases its volume. Why? Because change threatens fear's kingdom. Fear thrives where you stay the same. Fear survives where you stay small. Fear wins where you stay uncertain. But the moment you approach a new path, fear panics. It tries to intimidate you into retreat. Go back to what's familiar. You're not ready. It's safer where you were. You're stepping into danger. Fear hates growth. Fear fears expansion. And here is the irony. The more fear screams, the more confirmation you have that faith is leading you somewhere meaningful. When fear speaks louder than faith, you become a version of yourself that isn't true. Fear is the voice you obey. You slowly become someone you don't recognize. Fear turns potential into paralysis. Fear turns passion into hesitation. Fear turns calling into confusion. Fear turns identity into insecurity. When fear leads, you live small. When fear leads, you settle. When fear leads, you shrink to fit the limitations of your own imagination. Fear builds a false self, a shadow version of who you really are. But faith restores the original self, the one life was designed to hold. Faith resurrects the real you. Faith calls you forward. Fear pulls you backward. Faith expands your soul. Fear compresses it. Faith aligns you with destiny. Fear aligns you with comfort. You were never created to live under fear's authority. Your soul was wired for faith, wired for boldness, courage, resilience, transcendence. When fear speaks louder than faith, you betray your own design. Faith doesn't remove fear, it silences its authority. Many people believe that faith eliminates fear. It does. Single quotes, faith does not destroy fear. Faith dethrones fear. Fear can still speak, but faith decides whether the voice holds power. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is the refusal to obey fear. Faith doesn't require you to be fearless. Faith requires you to be obedient in the presence of fear. And obedience to faith reshapes your entire identity. You begin to live differently. You begin to breathe differently. You begin to walk differently. You stop living reactively. You start living purposefully. You stop moving according to fear's voice. You start moving according to faith's direction. You stop being controlled by insecurity. You start being guided by destiny. Fear may whisper, but faith will always win if you choose it. You cannot stop fear from speaking, but you can stop it from leading. Fear will always speak. Fear will always exist. Fear will always have something to say. You cannot silence fear completely, but you can silence its influence. Fear is a voice. Faith is a decision. You cannot control the presence of fear, but you can control the placement of fear. Fear can be in the car. Fear can sit in the back seat. Fear can whisper from the corner, but fear does not get to drive. Fear does not get to choose the direction. Fear does not get to decide the pace. Fear does not get to determine the destination. Faith takes the wheel. Faith sets the course. Faith chooses the horizon. Faith listens, but it does not obey fear. You can feel fear deeply and still move boldly. You can tremble and still walk forward. You can cry and still rise. You can doubt and still believe. Faith is not emotion. Faith is alignment. Faith is choosing your calling over your comfort. Faith is choosing your purpose over your panic. Faith is choosing your destiny over your doubt. When faith finally speaks louder, everything inside you shifts. When faith becomes the dominant voice, something awakens, something ancient, powerful, unbreakable. You begin to realize you were never fragile, you were never unworthy, you were never incapable, you were never alone. You were never too late, you were never too broken. Fear lied to you. Faith reveals you. And suddenly, your steps feel steadier, your heart feels stronger. Your purpose feels clearer, your wounds feel meaningful, your failures feel instructional, your future feels possible. Stop seeing yourself as damaged. You start seeing yourself as destined. The world feels less threatening beasts. Your soul feels more anchored. Faith restores identity. Faith restores dignity. Faith restores direction. Faith restores courage. Faith restores authority. Faith reintroduces you to the person you were meant to be. When fear speaks louder than faith, you survive. When faith speaks louder than fear, you live. Fear is the language of survival. Faith is the language of destiny. Fear keeps you alive. Faith helps you truly live. Fear keeps you safe. Faith makes you significant. Fear protects the body. Faith awakens the soul. Fear limits what you attempt. Faith expands what you become. Fear is the oldest voice in humanity. Faith is the deepest voice in divinity. And both are speaking in you every day, every hour, every moment. One question remains: which voice will you trust? The voice that chains, you're the voice that calls you. The voice that shrinks, you're the voice that expands you. The voice that reminds you of what hurt, you're the voice that reminds you of what's still possible. Fear will always speak. Faith will always answer. But life changes, destiny changes, when faith speaks louder than fear.